Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, and a happy Tuesday to you. Thanks for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or maybe you're just listening in your leisure wherever you podcast. I appreciate that. I go back to 1983 when a Six Flags TV commercial would start out like this.
You've never seen a Six Flags like this before.
That was the way a TV ad campaign began in the year 1983 for Six Flags. Flash forward to today, and over the weekend, this is what we learn about the Six Flags we never expected to see. We have this report from WANF Television in Atlanta.
Developing this morning, what should be a fun day at the amusement park took quite a turn when shots were fired right near Six Flags over Georgia last night. Atlanta News First reporter Asia Wilson is live outside of the park in Cobb County. Asia, investigators say an officer shot a person after people first shot at police.
And that's right, Megan. We just actually got a statement from Six Flags officials on what you're looking at it right now on your screen. It says in part, it is incredibly disappointing that our community is disrupted at public events throughout the region by groups of underage youth. Just like other venues in the area, we are committed to keeping this type of trouble outside of our park and off our property. Now, just looking at the video from yesterday, Cobb County police say a little after 6 last night, 500 to 600 people were running through the park and fighting. Investigators say when security and officers followed the unruly crowd out of the park onto Six Flags Parkway. This is off of the Six Flags property. An unknown number of suspects shot at officers. Police say as a result, an officer shot back and hit one of the suspects. That person was taken to Grady Memorial Hospital. We now have video of it from an Atlanta News First viewer where you can see and hear bystanders screaming, trying to get away as the shots rang out. Now, something interesting about all of this, almost a year to the date, on March 5th of last year, we reported several groups of young people were involved in fights inside of Six Flags back then as well. At this hour, we're still awaiting an update from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, who is now taking over this case.
As a 51-year-old, born in Georgia, raised in Georgia, resident of Atlanta, I have to tell you, this is disappointing. But I'm also going to be honest with you, and this is just anecdotal. I've been to Six Flags, I don't know, maybe 3 times in the last 10 years. And there's a reason for that. And I live just blocks from it. And there are days where it crosses my mind when the weather's nice on a weekday when I know the park won't be all that packed that maybe it's a good idea to go. And I resist the urge. As much as I am a large child, I love theme parks. I love going on thrill rides. I enjoy all that stuff. I'm a huge Dollywood fan, by the way. I will make the trip all the way up to Pigeon Forge to enjoy a day at Dollywood. I'm not so inclined to do so at Six Flags. And this is not an opportunity for me to just crap on Six Flags, the park itself and management. It's not the experience it was when we were kids. It's not the escape from all of life's doldrums, or it's just not the escape it once was. You used to, when we were kids, I sound like an old man. When we were kids in the 80s and into the 90s, you didn't have this. You just didn't have this. You didn't have packs of kids who were unattended, no adult supervision whatsoever. I watched as this sort of stuff was the downfall of one of the 2 shopping malls in my hometown of Augusta, Georgia, although that shopping mall probably should have never really been built where it was. It wasn't in an economically vibrant area of South Augusta, although maybe that was supposed to be the economic catalyst. And maybe there's something to be said for the fact that a theme park in South Cobb just isn't the economic catalyst it was ever envisioned to be. You look all around that theme park, you don't see economic development around it. It's another one of those scenarios, and I talk a lot about this from time to time when it comes to sports venues. People come to the venue and leave the venue, but they're not milling about afterwards. And there's talk of trying to develop some stay after, come early, million. Yeah, a little bit like the Battery. Think of the Battery, Atlanta, around Truist Park. But for Six Flags, there is some talk about that. It's just not coming to fruition. And I have to tell you, when you have incidents like this, it ain't coming any faster. Let me get back to some of the reporting on this specific incident over the weekend, though. David Arrow and Taylor Croft of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting that according to the GBI, several suspects were chased into the woods outside of the park after they had opened fire in the area, striking an unoccupied police vehicle. An officer eventually returned fire, hitting 15-year-old Sierra Littlefield of College Park, who remains hospitalized in critical condition. He will be facing a charge of aggravated assault. Actually, a few other charges, according to WXIA TV 11 Alive. He'll have a few charges waiting him once he's ready to be discharged. Taylor Croft and David Arrow reporting that a few hours later, Mapleton Mayor Michael Owens called the incident at his city's amusement park disappointing and said he plans to host several public safety meetings. He wants to collaborate with the Cobb Police Department and Cobb Sheriff's Office while discussing current safety protocols and procedures and exploring innovative approaches to enhance security. He said, I go to Six Flags. I take my kids often to Six Flags. My mother goes to Six Flags. Six Flags is still a very safe place to come to. Mapleton overall is a very safe city, and I intend to keep it that way. Now, as I start putting together today's show, I will let you know that I have reached out to Mayor Owens to join us. Don't know if he will get the messages or have time to respond in time for this show, but we hope to have him on very soon. I actually want to take you back inside this AJC article to the very beginning, where they honed in anecdotally on a family who was there when this all went down. What started as a day of excitement at Six Flags Over Georgia turned to panic for Jerica Johnson and her family when shots rang out. 43-year-old mother looked up to see hundreds of young people running in a panic, can you imagine, near the entrance and ticket booth area where she was navigating the crowds with her 49-year-old husband, 13-year-old son, and 6-year-old daughter who was in a stroller. Johnson said the whole crowd, quote, roared and started stepping on each other in what she called the scariest moment of her life, compounded by fears of an active shooter. It was almost like a stampede. My husband grabbed our daughter, and then in the crowd of people, we lost each other. I ran into the bathroom and hid in a stall and stayed in there until it sounded quiet. Can you imagine, as a parent, being there with your kids when this all goes down? Johnson and her husband, Shane, quickly lost sight of their son, Nathan. Can you imagine? Johnson then glanced at her daughter, Nevaeh, and couldn't believe what she saw. Someone attempting to hurdle over the pink and black stroller, which was used by the family to carry belongings and help Nevaeh when she got tired. The impact knocked the little girl out of the stroller and left her bruised. It was very scary, Johnson said. So here's a little more from WXIA TV's Molly Oak reporting from outside Six Flags, I believe, yesterday morning, giving us details on what law enforcement is doing to, literally comb through the woods around the park to see if there were other guns maybe tossed aside or left behind or hidden or stashed or whatever.
Yeah, and I want to give you some perspective of where I'm standing right now. So you see that roller coaster track behind me. So we're right next to Six Flags, then right across the street, really diagonal from the park. That's where we watched Cobb County Police for hours today. They told me they were doing an article search, which basically means the officers and canines were looking for any weapons that could have been tossed when a crowd of people ran into the woods. They wanted to make sure they found those weapons, if they did find any, before anyone else could get their hands on them.
Okay, so now listen to the list of charges that this 15-year-old will await once he's out of the hospital.
Some of those charges include aggravated assault on a police officer, possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, possession of a firearm under 18, and interference with government property. Now, I say he will be charged because the GBI says he's still in the hospital in critical condition, and Cobb police say they have the warrant for his arrest, and he will be arrested on the pending charges once he's discharged from the hospital.
So, listen, we've spent a little bit of time on this show so far this morning talking about what a nightmare scenario it was to be inside Six Flags Saturday when a shooting broke out and hundreds of young people were stampeding away from gunfire. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution talks to this Johnson family from Byron who made a 100-hour trek and stayed in a hotel nearby. They booked it 2 weeks ago. They're very excited about this annual pilgrimage to Mableton, Metro Atlanta, to go to Six Flags. And the reporting says in the hours leading up to the shooting, Johnson said everything was perfect. Her family went on roller coasters. Nevaeh posed for pictures with Looney Tunes characters, rode in the antique cars with her dad. Oh, I used to love the antique cars. I think that was a Firestone thing at the time. I don't remember who sponsors it now. But the 6-year-old also had the courage to put her hands in the air while riding up, and away. Her brother did the same as the family rode Monster Mansion together. She said, this is the mother speaking, during the day, I thought we were lucky because we were able to conveniently get on rides really fast and had a good time. I took a lot of pictures and videos, and then it was like something happened after 6:30 p.m. It started getting kind of crowded and more rough. And listen, for its part, Six Flags makes sure to let us know that this did not occur on their property. It did not occur in the park. It did not occur in the parking lot. The statement says, this took place on South Service Road that is not owned or operated by Six Flags. However, we join our community and the Atlanta region in our commitment to safety and security. We won't put up with that type of activity here. However, this type of activity did occur the first day of the 2023 season as well. There were fights that broke out at the parking lot at the park then, and then fights that broke out about 6 months later during Fright Fest when a 13-year-old was attacked by a group of other kids. So when we get back after a quick little break here, I'm going to pilfer through a couple of articles that I think are pretty important to touch on. How kids wind up with guns, how easy it is for kids now to wind up with guns, and why it's nearly impossible to do anything about it politically, and what is it that has kids comfortable possessing and walking around with a gun in their possession in the first place. There is a correlation. A University of Michigan study points that out, and I want to dive into that. Now, as for why I don't attend Six Flags that much, this really doesn't have an impact on, or hasn't in the past, this sort of notion. But I will say, it's not been an enjoyable experience as much. The theme park tends to rely a lot on teen employment, and again, I'm going to sound like an old man here. I just don't feel like kids who work in theme parks are really wired for hospitality. And it's hard to ask any kid to be wired for hospitality because, we all kind of got to fake it when we're being friendly to the customer. That's always right, even though the customer's not always right when you're working in a hospitality setting. Like I said, I'd rather just make a weekend of it and head up to Pigeon Forge and go to Dollywood. Now, that is a theme park. Anyway, quick break. Back in a second. This is The Ron Show on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. By the way, while listening to The Ron Show, whether you're listening between the hours of 9 and 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio, or you listen where you podcast, show notes always wind up out there for you, and a replay that you can listen to anytime at ronshowatl.com. I say that because I tend to cite articles from time to time that you may want to bookmark. I was watching The Daily Show last night, and a book author appeared in the guest segment, and so I made a little note. Maybe you do that too. Whether you do or don't, at the end of the day, I do what I call a show blog. I mentioned show notes that you can go back and find links to the articles that I speak to. So we were talking about the gunfire outside Six Flags theme park over the weekend, and there's a 15-year-old awaiting charges. He's in critical condition still, I believe, and it is incidents like these that leave you wondering, how is it that we live in a world where teenagers are walking around with guns that they're able to possess with comfort? How did they possess them in the first place? And it turns out it's actually pretty easy. This Washington Post article from just last summer, written by Tom Jackman and Emily Davies, speaks to just how easy it is for a teenager to get a gun, with or without mom's knowledge, indication, permission, money. The article starts at 18. Zachary Burkert was too young to buy a handgun from a licensed gun store, and he was an admitted drug dealer with mental health issues, court records show. So he went to the website of ADP Builder, a seller of ghost gun parts with no serial numbers, bought a gun kit, and assembled a complete pistol himself. Now, listen, I don't know what gun was used at the Six Flags theme park. I have no idea. But this is one such case that shows you how easy it is for teens who intend to carry a gun for self-defense or for nefarious purposes, how easy it is for them to possess a gun. About 2 months later, Burkhart watched a fistfight unfold between two schoolmates at a friend's house. He entered the Springfield, Virginia home's garage and began shooting. Ershine Elazier and Calvin Van Pelt, both age 17, were killed by bullets from Burkhart's homemade ghost gun. Neither of the victims were armed. Van Pelt was shot twice in the back as he ran away. In court, an audio recording was played of the 2021 shooting, while the parents of both victims listened in agony. You can hear our son saying, "Hey, cool it. Fight's over. We're good." That's Calvin. I mean, even in the face of death, his father, Michael Winfield, said he was being a leader trying to calm things down. Van Pelt had never met Burkhart, and Van Pelt's family was stunned to learn how the gun wound up in Burkhart's hands. They've just made it entirely too easy to get these guns, according to Winfield, the father, sitting next to his wife, who during a recent interview wore a necklace with a picture of their late son smiling. A child can buy one. There's no background checks. You don't even need a bank account. You can go to the 7-Eleven, get a debit card, put money on it, and buy a gun. The article continues. The families of the two teens who were killed at this incident, with the help of the anti-gun violence group Everytown for Gun Safety, that is the group that came up after the Sandy Hook school shooting, are now suing the distributor of the parts Burkhart used to make his ghost gun, ADP Builder of Florida, and the manufacturer, Polymer 80 of Nevada, for gross negligence in providing a teenager with a weapon when he was not legally able to buy a handgun from a federally licensed dealer. Remember, though, the suspect in this case was at the time at least 18 years of age. So it was probably only his criminal record that would have made it illegal for him to purchase the weapon. The Washington Post article cites some other incidences where ghost guns were used by kids. Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Police arrested two teens with ghost guns in December after authorities said one of them attempted to shoot someone outside their car but instead killed their friend inside it. New Rochelle, New York. A 16-year-old created a ghost gun factory in his bedroom in 2022 before killing another 16-year-old. In 1 week in 2022 in Prince George's County, Maryland, a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old were arrested in their schools while carrying ghost guns. Montgomery County, Maryland, a teen using a ghost gun shot and seriously injured another student inside the boys' bathroom at Magruder High School. Incidentally, with the skirmish over immigration policy and the Senate forming a bipartisan committee that had come up with some tangible action on immigration, there was actually also Chuck Schumer pushing for extending a provision that federally criminalizes fully plastic ghost guns or firearms a person puts together. That provision expires in 3 days. The weapon parts can be purchased online or 3D printed and are difficult for police to trace or detect and are more likely to be used to commit a crime. According to a Spectrum News article of the background here, in 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Undetectable Firearms Act, which banned firearms undiscoverable by metal detectors or X-ray scanners. The current law requires guns to have at least 4 ounces of metal or about the weight of a roll of pennies. That ban, a 35-year-old ban, why do we put limits on bans like this? That ban expires in 3 days. Okay, so I also mentioned there was a University of Michigan study that I thought was pretty chilling. The headline here, teens are more likely to carry guns if they're exposed to violence, according to a University of Michigan study. Teenagers who witness different types of violence are more likely to carry a firearm, according to a new study led by the University of Michigan. The study, conducted by researchers at UM's Institute of Firearms Injury Prevention in collaboration with the Firearms Safety Among Children and Teens Consortium, That's a fun group that gets together, I'm sure. Shows that exposure to violence, regardless of whether that violence involves a gun, has a significant association with firearm carriage among youths aged 14 to 18. And by the way, they're not talking about kids playing video games with violence in the game or violence in movies or TV shows. This is firsthand witnessing of violence, whether it be a fist fight breaking out or domestic violence or potentially gun violence in another setting. Reading a little bit more from that study, researchers examined data from a national survey that polled more than 2,100 U.S. teens and found that reducing exposure to violence may be one mechanism for disrupting cycles of violence among teen populations. 14% of study participants reported having witnessed firearm-related violence, and 66% reported having witnessed non-firearm-related violence over a 12-month period. Those who witnessed firearm-related violence, such as seeing someone use a gun to threaten another person, were 3.7 times more likely to carry a firearm than those who had not witnessed any gun violence, the research shows. And zero bipartisan appetite to do anything about it. Back after this.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So I don't think anyone was all that surprised yesterday when the Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, sided with former President Donald Trump to be allowed to stay on the Colorado ballot. I mean, we could get into the wonkiness and the legalese of that. I think at the end of the day, I think the Supreme Court said, we have 50 states and U.S. territories in addition, and they all have their own way of doing things electorally, and it's sort of impossible to apply, oh my God, the 14th Amendment to all 50 states who do things different when it comes to their elections. And today is Super Tuesday. There will be a lot of results today. I would think almost none of which would include a Nikki Haley victory. So this could spell the demise of the Nikki Haley campaign for the Republican nomination for the presidency. I say that because she's been sort of dodgy when it comes to being asked about, will you, when you step down or when your campaign ends for the nomination, turn and endorse former President Donald Trump? Now, initially, when the primary campaign began, I think all but Donald Trump had signed a pledge in order to participate in the debates. Remember, the debate folks said, you got to do this. You have to endorse that you will, or you have to state that you will endorse the eventual nominee, whoever it is. Nikki Haley is basically saying, I think I'm reneging on that. Donald Trump never agreed to it. He was never going to bend the knee to anyone else if it just so happened that Republican voters got their minds right, or one of these candidates who was seeking to take him down got their shit together and got the majority, you would think the majority of the party at least, to coalesce behind one candidate not named Donald John Trump, who is under indictment in several theaters of court. And so I'm laying down, I'm going to bed last night. I set my TV timer to go off about an hour in, and I normally, here's a little bit about me, I normally just put the Golden Girls on, like the Hallmark Channel. Let the old ladies put me to bed. You know, there's enough going on in the world that depresses us or gets us down or has us worried about the future or the present. So I like to be comforted. That's my comfort. Cats on laps, Golden Girls on TV, me giggling from 40-something-year-old sitcom humor. But for some reason last night, I don't know why, I think I turned YouTube TV on and Rachel Maddow was on, and she was talking about Black Panther, and I'm like, why is she talking about Black Panther? That movie's old, but it's years old now. Why is this relevant? And here's why. Here's why she was talking about Black Panther. Let me let you listen in a little bit on her segment.
Here is the serving Republican Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina on that movie, on Black Panther. He says it is, quote, created by an agnostic Jew and put to film by a satanic Marxist. He calls it, quote, this trash that was only created to pull the shekels out of your Schwarze pockets. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina.
That's right.
Tomorrow on Super Tuesday, he's actually going to be running in the North Carolina primary to try to become his party's nominee for governor of the great state of North Carolina. Here he is calling survivors of school gun massacres, quote, media prostitutes, as in prostitutes, but prostitutes. He calls them spoiled little bastards who need to shut up. Again, this is for kids who lived through a school shooting that killed 17 of their classmates.
Remember, we talked yesterday about the local pundit who appears frequently on WAGA Fox 5's The Georgia Gang, who can't be bothered to elevate his discourse above churlishness, calling the Athens mayor, what did he call him? He called him a lefty liberal liar, something like that. It was crazy. It was nuts. That's just not the sort of civil dialogue you expect to hear from pundits and politics, except now you do, unfortunately. All right, back to Rachel's piece here.
Shut up. He calls public school teachers, quote, wicked people. Wow. And not for nothing, he says this about the Holocaust. He says, quote, Hitler disarming millions of Jews and then marching them off to concentration camps is a bunch of hogwash.
Oh, my God.
He is the Republican Party's leading candidate to be their party's nominee for governor of the state of North Carolina. He will be on the ballot tomorrow in that state. He's already lieutenant governor in North Carolina. On Friday in Florida, Republicans in that state legislature passed yet another new law to restrict any teaching about racism in the United States. This happened just this past Friday, just a couple days ago in Florida. And in the debate over this new Florida bill, one Republican Florida state representative said that while this bill overall will restrict teaching about racism and things like slavery in Florida, he said there is one specific thing that he wanted to make sure is included in public education in Florida from here on out. He said while he supports this bill, he does want to make sure everybody's aware that slaves were, quote, paid for their work.
Oh, my God.
And so he wants to make sure that's taught in schools. And then he voted for the bill. This, of course, comes in Florida after the state's Republican governor tried to claim during his presidential campaign that there were actually a lot of underappreciated benefits of slavery for the people who were enslaved. Right. The chair of the Florida Democratic Party put out a statement in response, clearly just mystified, saying, quote, Florida Republicans are hell-bent on teaching our children that slavery wasn't bad.
At this point, I'm pulling the covers over my eyes and saying, Ron, you should have just gone to the Golden Girls tonight. Rachel is scaring you.
Pop over to Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, Republicans control the state government there, too. And like just about everywhere, that's true. Oklahoma Republicans have now banned abortion in almost every circumstance. But that apparently is not enough for them. Oklahoma Republicans are now moving a new bill that would create a state registry of every woman who does still find a way to get an abortion.
Creepy.
I wonder what Oklahoma Republicans will want to do with a state database of women who have undergone abortions.
By his eye.
Other lawmakers are warning that the way the Oklahoma bill is written, it looks like it's also, in addition to creating a registry of women who have had abortions, it also seems intended to ban contraception, including forms of contraception like the IUD. Wow. In Alabama, you may remember the 9 Republican justices on the Alabama Supreme Court issued a unanimous ruling that effectively outlawed fertility treatment in that state. After Alabama's Supreme Court Republicans did that, Democrats in Congress in Washington introduced federal legislation to protect fertility treatment and protect IVF. That legislation was blocked by Republican U.S. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith,
who looks a little bit like Sophia Petrillo, but doesn't look nearly as fun to hang out with late nights when you're trying to go to bed.
There are 219 Republicans in Congress right now. In the House, there's 219. Of that 219 number of Republicans, 125 of them are co-sponsors of legislation that would ban IVF.
That's more than half.
And arguably many popular forms of contraception as well. 125 House Republicans, more than half the Republicans in the House, co-sponsored that, including the Republican Speaker of the House. 125 of them. 195 of them voted against contraception, full stop. The Right to Contraception Act was introduced by Democrats after the Republican appointees on the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. The right to contraception. Only 8 Republicans in Congress voted for that. 195 voted against.
Oh, God. Can we get back to Florida? I need to go to Florida where the Golden Girls are awaiting me so that I can get a good night's sleep.
Florida, they are now contending with a super worrying outbreak of measles.
Yeah.
Measles, like it's the 1800s or something. One of the most transmissible pathogens on Earth. And one we don't typically have to worry about anymore in this country because for 60 freaking years, we've had a totally effective vaccine against measles. Except in Florida, Republicans picked a very special state surgeon general who's now telling Florida parents, who am I to suggest that perhaps kids should be vaccinated against measles?
Wow.
Yesterday, the Florida Department of Health released a letter from Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo emphasizing how contagious measles is, but did not urge parents to vaccinate their children.
He does not, which is an interesting letter from a Surgeon General.
Beyond who am I to say your kids should be vaccinated, the hand Republican-picked Florida Surgeon General wouldn't even say that kids with measles should stay home from school.
My God.
While they're infectious and symptomatic with one of the most transmissible, potentially fatal pathogens known to mankind. Measles in Florida. Not to be outdone, now the Republican Party's leading presidential candidate is saying on the stump that he will withhold all funding, not a penny, from any school anywhere in America if kids have to be vaccinated to come to school. Kids have to be vaccinated all over the country, everywhere, against measles and mumps and polio. I mean, it's been true for decades. It's been true for generations.
Ever notice how when you're speaking with someone like from an older generation who tends to be a little bit more conservative minded, they are the ones that you usually would hear said something along the lines of, "Oh, this country's going to they're not wrong, but I don't think they understand their complicity in that downward spiral." A little bit later on in this segment, Rachel comes for the state of Georgia, y'all.
Do you want one from Georgia?
No.
In Georgia, Republicans there are on the cusp of approving a new license plate, a new official license plate for the state of Georgia. And this one comes with a little history. In 1944, right, this is the apex of the Allies' final push to defeat the Nazis and win World War II. When FDR was running for his fourth term in office, the Republicans ran Thomas Dewey against him in the 1944 election. There was also a third party in the mix in 1944. They ran a preacher for president in 1944 who called himself a Christian nationalist. Mm-hmm. He ran on a platform that said that all American Jews should be forcibly sterilized and then deported from the United States. Yikes. That party was called the America First Party. Mm-hmm. Around the same time, there was also an organization called America First Incorporated, America First Inc. The leader of that group received a patent for a club that he said was specifically designed to murder Jews in America. He patented it in men's and ladies' sizes. He called it the Kite Killer, forgive me. He ran an organization called America First Inc. Both those organizations, the America First Party and America First Inc., in the 1940s were trying to capitalize on the notoriety and the name recognition of the America First Committee, which had at one point been very popular in the United States, but it started to wobble a little bit after its chief spokesman in 1941, Charles Lindbergh, gave a big speech in Iowa saying the only reason we were going to end up fighting in World War II is because the Jews were going to make us do it.
Wow.
The America First Committee and the America First Party and America First Inc. Georgia Republicans are about to approve a new taxpayer-supported official state Georgia license plate that says America First on it.
Yeah.
The Republican Party is kind of amazing right now. No matter where you look, no matter what state you look, contraception, if you're trying not to have a baby, that's over. IVF, if you're trying to have a baby, that's over too. The Holocaust denier should be the Republican nominee for governor. The sterilize the Jews and deport them movement should be memorialized on official state Georgia license plates. We want really, really, really small government that's nevertheless big enough to make an Oklahoma state registry of every woman who's ever had an abortion, and we'll tell you later what we're going to do with it. Yeah. Slaves had it great, actually. Slavery wasn't so bad. Let Florida Republicans tell you about it. It's retirees. It's the AARP that's the real evil in America. Tetanus and measles, honestly, they're kind of cute when it's for babies. And did I mention that on Friday, the leader of the Republican Party, the next Republican presidential nominee, is going to host at his home the authoritarian dictator of Hungary? Because dictators are kind of a thing for those guys right now, like polio is.
Yeah, he likes them.
We're back. I mean, the Republican Party is going through some things right now. Right up to the top, and in every state in the country.
I want to say that there was a bumper sticker that used to circulate in the 1990s in the Bill Clinton heyday that said something about Republicans may be crazy, but at least we're not Democrats. And I kind of feel like we're at this point in time where we look at the treasure trove of insanity coming from the other side of the aisle. And no, you know what? That bumper sticker actually was the other way, wasn't it? Yes, I'm a Democrat, but or something about it said something along the lines of, at least we're not crazy. Wink, wink. Head tilt to the right. All I know is I normally go to bed putting the Golden Girls on because, like, the Hallmark Channel will air, like, I don't know, 2-3 hours of back-to-back episodes, and it's just a good way to go to sleep. I usually find myself having a good night's sleep, and the TV turns itself off. I set it for 60 minutes, sometimes 30 if I'm really tired. I don't even think I make it through a whole episode, so I probably should set it for 30. Nonetheless, I have learned my lesson. And no disrespect to Rachel Maddow, who I respect, I adore, I learn a lot from her all the time I watch. I think I'll just stick to falling asleep with the Golden Girls on, if you don't mind, ma'am. Thank you so much. I appreciate all that information, however. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media outlet or outlets. That would be at Ron Show ATL. I mentioned yesterday, by the way, that I don't use Threads often enough. Like, I signed up like everybody else. We all rushed to Threads. And then I just kind of stopped posting on it. But if you follow on Threads, fine. Just give me a little ad or something, or tap me, or I don't know how you see. I'm not on enough to even know how it works. Reach out to me. Let me know that you're there. And I'd love to engage a little bit more on Threads. Or if you have a Blue Sky. Oh, my gosh. If you have a Blue Sky invite, I'm still waiting to get in on that little click. I think somebody tried to send me one once, and it got lost in spam. Anyway, final segments. And not to pile on, but Rachel Maddow's long laundry list of issues within the GOP got me to thinking about this story that broke yesterday. Let's see, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Greg Bluestein reporting that Representative Mike Collins, we spoke to one of his potential opponents last week, he representing the 10th Congressional District, which includes Athens-Clarke County. Mike Collins drawing rebukes from, by the way, both sides of the aisle after agreeing with an anti-Semitic social media account. Greg Bluestein reporting that Mike Collins drew bipartisan rebukes when he refused to delete a social media post that agreed with an account with a history of racist and anti-Semitic posts. The Jackson, Georgia Republican was condemned by figures from both parties Sunday when he seconded a social media post by an account that dubbed itself Garbage Human. Seems nice. That appeared to criticize a Washington Post reporter's Jewish heritage. Former Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger and Democratic State Representative Esther Penich of Sandy Springs, the only Jewish member of the Georgia legislature, were among those who panned Collins. It's one thing to mistakenly respond to an anti-Semitic account, Penich said. It's another thing to double down on it and gaslight us like it never happened. Mike Collins didn't directly address the post, writing on the X social media platform late Sunday that some are, quote, having a rough time wanting to see something that ain't there. But don't give up. Democratic State Senator Josh McLaurin addressed the issue Monday on the floor of the Georgia Senate.
Mr. President, on a serious note, I will cash in my honorary majority cred today just to deliver this message. Yesterday, I was alarmed, candidly, to see a reply on Twitter from a sitting Congressman, Mike Collins, in response to what is well known on the internet to be a far-right, in fact, neo-Nazi account based in Australia. And that account had posted a picture of a reporter who is Jewish, or at least the owner of the account said, if you're wondering, yes, she is. For those who are, this is a lot of layers of subculture and internet, but the bottom line is the obvious context was that the poster was talking about a woman and trying to identify her as Jewish as a dog whistle to the far right. Our own Georgia's Congressman Mike Collins replied to that and basically said something to the effect of, never had any doubt. Well, a lot of people jumped on him and said, you may not realize the context, but you need to delete this post. He has doubled down and he has refused to delete it. And what that means is that he is aware that he is dog whistling to an anti-Semitic base, and he's okay with it. My friends and my colleagues, I bring this to your attention today because this is exactly the kind of thing that HB 30 was supposedly designed to address, which is putting in front of prosecutors and agency officials this type of information about what type of dog whistles and not overt anti-Semitism might be out there to inform their decisions about how to respond to conduct that causes harm. And I just want to ask for accountability. We would hope that no matter which member of any party would do this, that we would band together and say this is not acceptable. And I know that not all of us are going to do that publicly, but what I ask is if you've got the group chats you're on, if you've got friends with connections to him or his staff, let him know that this is not okay. And that this type of behavior is exactly what we're talking about when we say that we can't let creeping anti-Semitism, whether it's by joke, whether it sounds nihilistic or not, we can't let it creep into our public discourse, and certainly not at the level of a sitting U.S. congressman. So I rise today to condemn Congressman Collins' statement, his refusal to cure the situation, and I ask for my colleagues' support publicly and privately in letting him know there's no space for hate or anti-Semitism in Georgia. Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege?
Okay, I just wanted to let that audio play out for just a little bit so that you could hear the applause within the Senate chamber. And from those inside, they will tell you even the applause was bipartisan. Mike Collins, for his part, Congressman Mike Collins, is just doubling down, tweeting, I guess pointing out that a Washington Post journo excusing crime because she believes America is on stolen land makes her a garbage human is anti-Semitic. Y'all just see stuff that ain't there. Still waiting on his speech about Laken Riley. That is Congressman Mike Collins retweeting Josh McLaurin's floor speech that you heard just now. So if you're following at home, that is Representative Mike Collins, who, like to end, favorited a anti-Semitic social media post, pivoting to again politicize the death of Laken Riley, this time in defense of his coziness with anti-Semitism online. I could spend the last 2 minutes of this segment and show reading some of the responses from Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter Michelle Baruchman reporting on this incident. Suffice to say that Elon Musk's preferred social media of choice, the one he owns, is not a hospitable place anymore. Not for civil discourse, not for pointing out anti-Semitism, not for much of anything civil anymore, unfortunately. Again, Blue Sky, which, by the way, I've just been told is open, so I guess I'll be spending a little time putting together a Blue Sky account, and hopefully I'll pay more attention to it than I did Threads. I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of activity on Threads to warrant the time. And I'm starting to sound like that old man again. There's so many social media accounts to keep up with. One of them has to go. Maybe it's the X platform at some point in time. All right. I'm looking at the clock, and I got about 60 seconds left, so I'm just going to go ahead and wrap things here. I want to thank you for listening. You can catch this show, again, we do the replay 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com. And then, of course, if you're listening via podcast, did you know that this thing can be heard early in the day, 9 to 10 a.m.? We roll it first thing in the morning on the America One Radio app and at AmericaOneRadio.com. Feel free to download that app. It's available on your iTunes market, the Apple Store, I should say, or the Google Play market as well. If you have an Android device, you can always tell, she's listening, so I'm going to say it softly, Alexa, to play the America One Radio app, and she will gladly oblige. Also, if you want to catch up on anything that you heard in today's show that I read from or you heard audio from, I always put that in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. All right? Have yourselves a great day. Back here tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m. on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, and then magically up here wherever you podcast. Have yourselves a good one.